All right. Welcome, Councilmember Waring. I don't know if Councilmember Bowden will be joining, and we're trying to track the mayor down as well. But I'm going to go ahead and get started now that we have a quorum, and I will call the Friday, February 10th, 2023 meeting of the Ad Hoc Rules Committee to order at 2:06. And I'd ask that we start with a moment of silence. Thank you. At the request of the clerk's office, the minutes are still being completed. So I just ask that we unanimously defer that to be adopted at a later point in time. And would like to move on, as we are on Friday afternoon, to item number 3, an ordinance to amend Chapter 2 of the Code of the City of Charleston, which is the standing committee's appointment by the mayor ordinance. By revising that, it was requested just for specificity. It was requested by Councilmember Waring. It was deferred at City Council and referred back here for consideration. So I would like to open the floor to Councilmember Waring if he's ready, and we can get moving.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did everybody have a chance to review the ordinance that the clerk sent out? Actually, I thought it was pretty good, the changes that were made. I had just a slight tweaking to it. And that the recommendations coming from the mayor, where the mayor recommends and with the advice and consent of council, if those recommendations could be made by the first meeting in December. That would give ample time for conversations to take place between council members, the mayor, any combination thereof, by the time we had the first meeting in January, and obviously vote on whatever committee positions that would be in front of us at the time, as opposed to, doing it in January and then we got the scramble going on. I know December is a busy time because you're normally finishing up the budget, but in most cases, it's just going to be tweaking to these committees. Not going to be wholesale changes one way or the other. So I would recommend the first meeting in December that the recommendations come forward to council. And then I also would recommend that the committees can go up to 6 members because that'll give a chance for to have more diversity and people who would like to get on a committee being limited to 5 members. If we went up to 6 with the stipulation that the chairperson could not vote to create a tie. You'd have a voting chairperson, but the idea is to move things through, to vote with an even number. If the chairman votes to bring a tie, and all that does is keeps things bogged up in committee as opposed to coming forward to council. So with those 2 minor changes, I throw that out for discussion and kind of see what the remainder of the committee's feelings are.
Councilman Waring, it's Rick. Can I just?
Hey.
The only concern I have is in a mayoral election here.
Yeah.
If we have a change in mayor, the new mayor might not have time. Say there's a runoff to make that December 1st. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but you remember now, you got these committees that's in place the whole year. And unless you had a wholesale change, well, you're right, you can have a change in the mayor, but the new mayor's got to come in and get acclimated to the rules as they are.
Yeah.
Or you amend the rules, one of the two, but that'll be a conversation between the new mayor and the then council.
Okay.
But
that was my only concern with moving it up to December 1st. But if you think it works.
Yeah, I mean, in most cases, obviously that November piece or you could do that, or you could push off when council votes. It would be ideally good to do it the first meeting, but you could push the vote to the second meeting in January to kind of give more leeway, Rick, to what you're talking about. So if you did have a new mayor in that particular case, then maybe the mayor recommends by the second meeting in December, and those positions are voted upon by the second meeting in January.
And thank you, Councilor Waring. I like the idea of the committee assignments coming in sooner rather than later.
I agree.
And I think that you're right. Without us having to to get very legalese in terms of having to say like, unless a new mayor is elected, upon which this would be have to happen. I think if we just say it's introduced at the first meeting or first regularly scheduled council meeting in December, for deliberation for council to certify or to approve the recommendations at no later than its second meeting in January. I think that fixes everything.
I agree with that. So, because when you think about it, even in December, you got Christmas, you got New Year's, you got people going in and out of town. So it's really not a full month to kind of pick up the phone and call one another or kibitz about. So that I like if we can do it by the first meeting, fine, but no later than the second meeting in January, I think takes care of the issue.
Yep. Councilmember Tucker.
Thank you, Chairman. Does this address the ordinance as it is? I read it. I didn't particularly see this point in there. Does this address any kind of debate that we could have or dissension on the floor when a slate of city council members is recommended for a standing committee, but a few of us don't agree? How do we work through that challenge?
Well, that's what I mean. In other words, hopefully we're going to have a lot of conversations between. See, right now, what's been in the past, you really find out those committees kind of like at the last minute. I mean, there's been years when I didn't find out until it was put on my desk at city council meeting. In this case, you'd find out in December, and if, for example, you wanted to be on, I don't know, sustainability, and you're not, you could reach out and say, hey, man, I'd like to be on sustainability. There's some of your colleagues on council, or call them there and say, I'd like to be. It'll be more, I think, collegial conversation taking place as opposed to you done me wrong on the floor of council. So that's what I think. I think you can find out that for instance, when I got put on the history convention, I'm serious, man, that's not my area. But I had to deny that on the floor of council.
You would have been a good member. Come on. Come on.
No, listen, we all got limited.
Give history lessons.
We all got a limited amount of time, man. And, as we soon find out, you get elected to these council seats, man. We got more meetings to go to than the law allows. Sometimes I feel. But anyway, so I think again, to answer your question, Councilman Sacred, I think if that happens, that would mean that we were devoid of conversation for the better part of a month. And shame on us, or shame on me if I'm a council member and I waited until 30 days to bring this forward. And eventually that slate comes forward to be voted on in majority rules.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say as well, if it's introduced on the 1st of December and council wants to make those tweaks by saying that it can be approved no later than the January meeting, that allows for if a new administration comes in, but also if you were appointed to a committee that you didn't particularly want or you wanted to move, being able to have essentially, not counting the kind of 2 weeks of the holidays, it gives you essentially a month to move through and be able to have those conversations with everybody as well as the mayor's office. I think the idea of let's have the conversations so that the mayor can have a slate that he wants to introduce on the first regularly scheduled meeting in December. Then if there's something that people want to change, that's when the kind of shifting of the sands goes on, knowing that we can come back in January, we can do it at the first meeting or we can do it at the second meeting and have everything figured out. So
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that approach. And then what was the second part that you had mentioned that you wanted to see change?
I think having 6 members on up to 6 members on each standing committee allows, if somebody wants to be put on real estate right now, if the five slots are taken, it allows one more council person, obviously without having a quorum, 7 being a quorum of council. But I still think that if we go to 6, then the caveat ought to be that the chairperson, which is normally, as you know, Councilman Brady, part of Robert Rules of Order. I mean, you can always suspend that part of the rule, but
Right.
by common agreement. But normally, the chairperson of a committee cannot vote to create a tie, vote to break a tie, but not to create a tie. And I think if we did that, it would allow more representation for, in particular, new members that maybe just got elected and would like to, you might have a particular skill sets that would like to serve on, let's say, recreation. Councilman Shealy has got a lot of experience in recreation in his earlier career prior to him, being on being all-state agent. So obviously, he's really good at being on that recreation committee. So, but suppose all the slots were taken, with 6 being there, it opens up the opportunity for cross-pollination across many more committees on behalf of council members.
Let me ask this of the clerk's office. If the committees went up to 6, what would the quorum be? Would it be 4 to conduct business if you had 6 members on a committee?
Well, yeah.
Yes, sir, I believe so, but we also have to consider the mayor is an ex officio member of all committees. So your actual total is going to be 7.
Okay. Yeah, you gotta stay away from 7.
I also think if it starts getting up that large, you're hurting the cat, so to speak, with schedules to get regular attendance. I think would be a bit of a struggle.
Well, if the council person can't vote to create a tie, then Madam Clerk, wouldn't the quorum be 3?
Well, no, I mean, I might need to lean on legal for that question, but I mean, a quorum is a quorum. Whether or not one of the commission or committee members is intending to vote, Maggie.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right, Jennifer, that a quorum is a quorum. So whether or not they're voting, really, that doesn't have any bearing on that. It would still be a quorum.
Okay, I was just trying to find a way for other council members who feel locked out. There's one thing that kind of echoed with me when Councilwoman Parker said that, she didn't have a prayer getting on some of these committees, and the new person coming on, I wouldn't want that feeling to have credibility in whatever we emerge on the other side with the modified ordinance. Or let's say Councilmember Boyd Gregg, being the newest member, I think,
yep.
Feeling the same way. So we want to try to craft something that takes that out of the equation.
Councilmember, can I suggest this? You've got public safety, traffic and transportation, and real estate that right now only have 4 members. The mayor makes 5th. You could add another member to those committees, which then gives council members the opportunity, to sit on either public safety, traffic and transportation, real estate, which they don't have now because those are limited by right now they're 4 members plus the mayor.
Well, thank you, Rick. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to. So that helps. Helps satisfy more representation. One of the things that came up in this, I don't know about you all, but I didn't think about this part about having representation from the standpoint of the different parts of the city, until it was pointed out that, I think real estate has, I don't know how many people from West Ashley on it, and, nobody from Johns Island or Daniel Island or whatever. It just happened to evolve that way, but there wasn't no purpose, of course. But, again, that helps to get that, I guess, regional diversity on various committees as well. So good point, Rick. If we can do that, that still kind of solves that.
At least it gets us along the road that you're looking for without getting into the situation of having 7 members and all of that.
Right. I know we got to stay away from 7.
And if you look at real estate, you're absolutely correct. You've got 3 of the 4 members, or 4 if you count the mayor, live in West Ashley.
Right. Yeah.
And
so
you could add some diversity to it if you had a 5th member to that.
Right.
Yeah, I like that idea as well, especially that those 3 committees discuss some of the more visible things going on with
Yeah.
council, that, you know, because I think that that's also kind of part of the, when you're a new council member, if you could be on a committee such as those where you feel like you're being able to weigh in on some of the, like, you know, large transportation infrastructure projects, some of the public safety initiatives, you know, real estate doing its thing, with the deed agreements and that type of thing, that's when you get to start really feeling the machinations of the movements of council and what's going on and coming through the pipeline. So I like the idea of the extra council member spots on those three, to open it up. And also, you know, no one likes groupthink, so, you know, having a little more geographic diversity as well, I don't think hurts anything.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Until she pointed it out, I gotta be frank. I never paid attention to that.
So Rick, just to ask, since you had brought up that idea, is that something we would need to make a motion to change in the ordinance, or is that merely that we would just appoint like 3 extra people to those committees, or 1 to each of those committees?
I think it requires an ordinance change in general.
Yeah.
And we did this, you know, a council or so ago, because we had 4 members on Public Works, and we thought that down, and then we changed the ordinance so we could add Councilman Seekings, because so many of the Public Works projects affected the peninsula and they weren't represented. So I think it requires an ordinance, doesn't it, Jennifer?
And the committee composition is actually part of the rules of order. And so that could be one of the changes. If the committee wants to do that today, they can propose that change. It's actually, I just had it in front of me, but it is section 2-50 of the rules of order. So we would just go into items 2, 3, and 4, which are public works and utilities, public safety, and traffic and transportation. I'm sorry, not public works and utilities. Public safety, it's 3, 4, and 5. Public safety, traffic and transportation, and real estate. And we would just change that from 4 to 5. And that would be part of the changes that y'all proposed today. And then that would come to council on Tuesday.
I know we're going a little bit out of order, but since we are on this, would anyone like to propose a motion to move forward as the clerk's office is presented?
I'll make the motion. So move.
I'll second.
Okay, that motion has been properly moved and seconded that we amend the rules of council to add an extra council member spot to traffic and transportation, public safety, and real estate. Is there any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I do. I still think that piece, now that we would be up to 6 members, including the mayor, I still think that the chairperson shouldn't be able to vote to create a tie. Just from an efficiency standpoint on moving things through committees. As opposed to, you know, things moving, you know, you get 3 to 3 and it's stuck in the committee. So that's why I will say something else, Madam Clerk, and looking at section 2-50, if you look at, well, community development and special facilities, we've got 6 members of council. Obviously, when the mayor there, we have 7. Why does that? We try to stay away from having 7 members. Why is that allowed on those 2 committees and not the remainder? What's the thing? I'm trying to discover the thinking on that.
Honestly, I'm not sure, because it's been that way for a while.
Yeah.
It was
But
that
that is
many
correct.
when
Right.
I came on board.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
always
agreeing
been a
with you.
big committee.
Because we've
Yeah.
we've had discussions about that too, because we've always noticed that on special facilities and community development. I mean, technically, you do have a quorum of council there, even though they're meeting as that committee. And
I agree.
I think
But-
that's, yeah.
Well, while we kind of making these changes, why don't we kind of do a little housekeeping and clean that up as well? I think we should stay away from 7. I mean, the audit committee is one thing, that's different, that's almost a committee of the whole, but,
Yep, and same thing with ad hoc budget as well, because you're using different chairmen to fill those spots on ad hoc budget.
correct. So,
Would you propose then, as part of your motion, Councilmember Waring, to on the other commit that no committee may have more than 5 council member appointments?
I would agree if you accept that amendment to the motion, Mr. Chair. That'll be my motion.
I will accept your amendment to that, and to just so I can state it for the record, the Councilmember Waring's motion, which was seconded by Councilmember Saccharin, is to amend the rules of council to allow for 5, no more than 5 council member appointments to traffic and transportation, public safety, real estate, community development, and special facilities.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on that, Councilmember Saccharin?
Just point of clarification for me. So there'd be 5 council members and then the mayor, which makes 6. And the quorum would be 4, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything? If not, I'd like to call the question.
Well, and tell me why, I mean, community development feels like it's been working fine. Why would we cut somebody off of that again?
Well, it's just about having a quorum of council, the number 7. That's about all. And if you do it at community development and special facilities, why not all the other committees being limited to 5? I think there's a rationale in keeping it below the quorum of council, which is 7.
I see.
I just think that's an oversight that's been allowed to go through for decades.
Yeah.
We never paid attention to it.
No, it's all, I mean, it's been that way as long as I've been
Right.
there.
Right.
Yeah, I tend to agree, Councilmember Waring. You know, aside from some of the ad hoc committees, or the ones that are temporary in nature, like the audit committee, where you're using appointed positions to constitute that committee already, it wouldn't make sense that we would have every single committee be a majority of council, because we may as well just make the whole thing a committee of the whole at that point and just call everybody.
Right.
So I like keeping it at you know, that we would have the committees be less than the majority of council as a matter of practice, unless, you know, like the audit committee or the ad hoc budget committee or something like that comes up.
Right.
But for the standing committees, I think that's right.
I agree with that.
All right. Is there any
I didn't know if
discussion?
the mayor came on late. I don't know if you heard, we were talking about the recommendation from the mayor coming down, you know, the first part of December. And I think Councilman Brady added, that would give time for, after your recommendations, council members to speak to you, council members to communicate with one another before it's voted upon in January. And Councilmember Brady added, which I thought was a good add, the vote would take place in the January meeting. So for the end of January, those positions would be voted upon. So if for whatever reason, Rick brought up a good situation with election, being an election year, and you know, he said, what happens if you had a new mayor? You know, maybe that new mayor would need a little more time. But by the end of January, by the second meeting in January, all these standing committees would be voted upon.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. And now I'm going off the reservation maybe, but did y'all see the House of Representatives? It's at least in committee, they have a bill that would mandate cities, mayors and council members take office, you know, within the next week after getting certified in election.
Wow.
Which would be contrary to what we've been doing here forever. And I personally don't think that's a very good idea. I don't
think so either.
that it has a chance of passing, but anyway, for whatever reason, they've decided they want to tinker with that as well.
Why would the feds even want to even talk about that?
And what's the rationale behind that?
I don't even know what the rationale is.
This
Yeah.
is not the feds, this is the state, Keith.
Oh, the
State,
state, I thought you meant
Yeah.
Congress.
Me too.
state legislature.
I tell you one thing, if they want to talk about something, I've never understood why mayoral elections or municipal elections are off-year elections. I mean, I understand why, but you never have a big turnout. I mean, you get 20% turnout. But you can't vote when the governor's up or the president's up or U.S. senator or whatever, state representative. And it's that way across the country. Never understood that. It's going to be just as easy to put these council seats up and mayoral seats up when the governor or the senator or whoever, county council.
I mean, part of the issue with that, I can just kind of speak to it, is the down ballot fatigue that happens with people, where even if you had a higher turnout in an election, you see the vote totals drop off as people have to page over on the electronic machine to get to the lower races. So it really doesn't, you get a higher turnout, but you may end up with a similar number of votes as you do, especially during like a mayoral election year.
So is that, excuse, we keep talking about, we still have the question on the floor, but.
Correct.
Let's come back to the election. I do want to comment on something there.
Well, can I call the question on Councilmember Waring's motion for the committees to have no more than 5 council members for the committees that we named in the motion? If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 So Mr. Chairman, what I was going to say was, I've never checked, are we required by state law to have our elections in odd numbered years? I'm not even sure.
That's a question for legal.
Yeah.
I know that there's broad discretion because other municipalities have them in like January and February.
Yeah.
I think we can have them whenever we want them, but I could be wrong.
My recollection is that we get to determine the when and the where.
Oh, okay.
I have to confirm that, but that's what I recall being the case.
So if y'all wanted to have it on the regular even numbered election years, I think we could.
All right.
Yeah. But as to the other, we didn't vote on Councilmember Waring's proposal for the introduction of the mayor's slate of chairs and committee appointments. And I don't think we directed legal to come up with that language either to add in there. So if we could go back and just make sure we have that stated and we can vote on that as well.
I mean, as to when he makes the recommendation?
Right.
Yeah,
And then we have something for legal to add so that when it goes to council on Tuesday, we can actually have something.
I agree with that. So you need a motion on that? So the mayor's recommendation would be brought forth to council for standing committees in December. And then council would vote on it
No later
than the second meeting in January.
That sounds good to me.
Right.
You want the first meeting in December, don't you, Keith?
First meeting.
Yeah, I meant the first meeting in December.
Right.
And then can be voted on no later than the second meeting in January.
Yep.
And that gives I don't know if you had jumped on yet, Mayor, but we were saying, essentially the holidays kind of knock out 2 weeks there with Christmas and New Year's. So it effectively gives a month for if people want to talk to you or talk to each other about moving stuff and slotting around, they have a month to do it that's not taken up with just the holidays.
Right.
And that feels fair to me.
Right.
And so is there a second for Councilmember Waring's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, it has been properly moved and seconded that the mayor's recommendations for council chairs and committee appointments would be introduced at the second council meeting in December, or first council meeting, first council meeting in December, and will be approved no later than the second meeting in January.
Right.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, one last thing, discussion on that. I don't know whether it should be a second motion or not, but this procedurally about the chairperson voting to create a tie. I don't think in the committees we should have that. Idea is to move it forward to the body at large. I think it keeps things from being boggled up in committee. Now that we have an even number, see, now we never had to worry about that when we had odd numbers. But having an even number, that may happen more than you would think.
The only thing that I feel kind of cautioned about is you would be restricting another council member's ability to vote in the manner in which they've, essentially been elected to vote. So if they wanted to vote no on something in committee, we're now restricting that ability, or vote yes on something in committee, we're now restricting that ability.
You might have a point. When you think about it, the recommendation was a tie, so it still comes forward to the full body. So maybe it doesn't stay boggled up in committee. When it reports out, it report that the vote was 3-3.
Right.
It still comes to the floor. So let me withdraw that.
And Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, if there's ever a tie, then the item fails. Because it doesn't have the necessary votes to pass.
But the recommendation would still come forward from the committee to the body, the whole body, as voted 3-3. I think that's actually happened before.
Yeah. So the concept being, when you give the committee report, you would say that that it was a tie, and the item failed in committee, but that item can still be brought out.
Correct.
To be voted on by the full body. Yeah.
Yes. So let me withdraw that idea. Forget about that.
It still comes forward. There is the idea in Robert's Rules of Order. It's called a discharge petition, is the formal name for it, which is that if you want a committee, if something did get bogged down in committee, a majority of the full body can vote to take away the purview of the committee on that one particular item to bring it forward for full consideration. So the Robert's Rules already kind of have the ability to pull something out if we needed to. So thank you, Councilor Ware. Yeah. So we have the motion on the floor for the appointments to come in December, first meeting in December, and be voted on no later than the second meeting in January. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All right, hearing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? That item passes. All right. I would like to move on. We kind of jumped around a little bit, but to move to the last item on the agenda, which is to review, update, and approve the rules of order. We did already make one update to that with the 5 council members, no more than 5 council members on any standing committee. Is there anything else in the rules of order that those present would like to see potentially amended to provide that recommendation to the full body?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chairman.
Jennifer, didn't you have a recommendation or two for a couple of tweaks?
Yes, sir. And I've shared my screen, and I don't know, are y'all seeing the code on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a couple of housekeeping items. One was under 2-36, and it's related to our away meetings. I wanted to change the language or just tweak it to say that the regular meetings of council will be held in City Hall, except that council will, and then add in the words, make best efforts to hold 4 regular meetings at alternate locations within the city limits, only because I know, like with COVID in 2020, we weren't able to do that. And then also last year, I know IT had ordered away equipment so that we would not have to use an outside vendor to assist us with our away meetings. And due to the supply chain shortages, even though they ordered it early in the year, all of the stuff didn't come in until the very end of last year. So that just sort of, covers us in case, anything happens to where we would not be able to do that. And that was one change.
So my recommendation with that on the language, I'm just looking at it right here that you have on the screen. So regular meetings of council will be held in City Hall, except that council, and then this is where I would say, may at its discretion hold for meetings at alternate locations within the city limits. And then that gives us the flexibility of, you know, sometimes we've had locations become unavailable. Sometimes locations that we've wanted to do haven't been in the city limits. That's happened before. But that way it just gives us the kind of elastic language that we may do it, like we may hold up to this many, but it's not a requirement. Because will, I think, implies obligation that we're going to go on the road with 4 no matter what.
Right.
I think that sounds good.
I think that's reasonable.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on YouTube. And Madam Clerk, was there any other things in the rules of order that you wanted to kind of get cleaned up?
Yes, sir. Under call to order of business, we just need to rearrange some of the items that are listed in there. This sort of lists out the order of our council agendas. The reading of the journal of the previous meeting, that should actually be number 2 because it comes before citizens participation. So we would just be swapping 2 and 3. And then number 6, reports or communication from city officers or boards. We need to strike that because we actually don't have a separate section for that. We include all of that under petitions and communications. So it would be to strike number 6 and then edit number 4, which says petitions received and disposed of. Change that to petitions and communications to include reports or communication from city officers or boards. And those were the only other changes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Is
So move, Mr. Chairman. Those
all
changes.
right. It's been properly moved that we adopt the changes that were just proposed herein. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Councilmember seconds. Say that 10 times fast. And is there any further discussion on this item? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the proposed changes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. It passes unanimously. Is there anything else to come before us that gets through the agenda that we had?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is not part of the rules of order, but it is something we may need to edit in the code. And it's the part related to requiring an in-person quorum at city council meetings. And we probably need to edit that language to ensure that it states there are exceptions for city council workshops or special meetings so that because we have to have some of those virtually just because they don't fall on our regular council meeting day. And so it may be difficult for council members who want to attend those workshops to actually be able to do that in person. And so we just need to make sure we have that covered in the code. It's actually not a part, it's not in the rules of order, but that's something that the rules committee might want to consider at a future meeting.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I do have
Yes,
one
sir.
thing. I want to thank the mayor and you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee and staff for working through this on reconsideration in an amicable way. I really do appreciate that. Appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Zachary and Chairman Brady and all staff. So thank you very much.
No, you're welcome, Councilmember. And with that, I would like to give everybody back like 15 minutes of their Friday.
All right.
TGIF.
That's right. That's right. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see everybody on Tuesday.
Good
We
deal.
stand adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See y'all.